All right, Madam Clerk, call this meeting to order. Present. Here. 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 Okay. Thank you everyone for being here again. The committee, everyone in the chamber. Madam Clerk, if you can please let the record reflect that Councilman K is in attendance.
So noted.
Especially in light of the number of people who are here. This room, although it's one of my favorite in the city for its beauty, it doesn't have the best acoustics in the world. So just for the sake of everyone in the table and in the room, maybe you can, speak up a little bit. That would be helpful, I think, for everybody. Okay. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you please be able to read each of the agenda items into the record so we can begin the discussion?
Number 1, the title of the proposed ordinance establishing Chapter 18 for Community Safety Act. Number 2, discussion relative to the proposed ordinance establishing Chapter 18 for Code of Ordinances, Community Safety Act, Section C, documentation, subsection 4. Number 3, discussion relative to the proposed ordinance establishing Chapter 18.4 of the Code of Ordinances, Community Safety Act, Section F, surveillance and privacy, subsection G. Number 4, discussion relative to the proposed ordinance establishing Chapter 18.4 of the Code of Ordinances, Community Safety Act, Section I, accountability and enforcement, subsection 2. Number 5, discussion relative to the Community Safety Act, working group final report.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay. So we have a number of items that were continued from the meeting on Monday. A couple of additional items. Nick, do you have a handout for us?
Yeah. I actually have 2 for everyone today.
Okay.
One of the requests that was made in the last meeting was that I create a red line version for everyone with the changes that have already been agreed to by this working group. And so that's what this is here. I have 20 copies, which should be more than enough here. The other thing that I did was I highlighted in here the sections that are up for discussion today, so it should be easy to find them. I also have, as I've done for the other meetings, this shorter one, which is a more annotated version of the agenda that has the same section for everyone as well. Okay? And I should, as the red line version is going around, at the end of the last meeting, there was discussion of changing various instances in there of gendered language and making it gender neutral, so I made those changes as well. We'd also had the discussion of eliminating every reference to badge number and replacing it with identification number. That changes in made as well. So I just wanted to be aware of that and impact that out.
Madam Clerk, if you please let the record reflect that Sidney Kenna is also in attendance. Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, if you could please designate the first handout, which is the larger one, as Exhibit A tonight's meeting, and the one-pager, which is the second handout distributed, as Exhibit B for tonight's meeting. Did you get that, Madam Clerk?
So noted.
Thank you. Everyone want to take just a couple minutes to look through the larger document, and then Nick, you'll be able to go over the items which are highlighted in the smaller document.
Sure. So the first item on the agenda for tonight is the title itself. And the last meeting we had some discussion of changing the title of the ordinance. I just listed on the smaller handout here a couple of the ideas for main changes that have come out. One was Providence Comprehensive Safety Act. Another was Providence Community Police Relations Act. I just left it at that. I'm not sure if since last meeting people have got a chance to put more thought into that, or other ideas that people want to put on the table. So that's just there for your thought discussion. As we go down to number 2 on the list, Chairman, assuming we just
Please, just one moment. Madam Clerk, please let the record reflect that Councilwoman Castillo is in attendance. Thank you.
Item number 2 is under section C, documentation in the ordinance, and this just came out at the end of last meeting in the discussion. Just for clarity's sake, on number 4 there, where it says, once a video audio recording of the stop has been preserved by the police for further investigation. Just to clarify the intent of that section, the suggestion was, after it has the word preserved, would add the phrase, beyond the minimum retention period established by policy. So in this ordinance, it says that there's a minimum retention period for all video and audio recordings of at least 60 days, but the police department can create a policy that takes it beyond that. This is simply saying that this would only apply if it's being held beyond that minimum retention period, whatever that's determined in the policy. And that's a clarification. If we go on to item number 3, this is under section F, surveillance and privacy, subsection 8. In earlier meetings, we had discussions here around whether or not association or some variation of association could be used as possible criteria for inclusion on the game. And I believe that there had been discussion at one point about where it says written notes and whether that was included there or not. Under number 4, as we move down, section I, accountability and enforcement. This is something that we talked about in the last meeting and discussed the possibility of adding in the phrase knowing and willful for violations in the 2 subclauses underneath 2 there. And then number 5, the last item on the agenda for tonight, is just that a discussion of the report that this working group is meant to submit to the council at the end of this. I think that the intent of that is basically that it would be sort of like a cover letter on top of a final red line version, just saying this is what the group has reached. This is what we reached consensus on. If there are things that we did not reach consensus on, what about that as well? Just want to have a discussion about that tonight. And I think that takes us to the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. Are there any initial questions or points that anyone would like Nick to go over again before we start delving into some of the specifics? Okay. Shall we begin with item number 1? So this is relative to the name of the ordinance. Everyone knows that it's the Community Safety Act. We had a pretty lengthy discussion on this matter on Monday. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment or suggestion or a point on item number 1? Linda.
So last week we kind of talked about this, and we kind of just wanted to give it up to the council to decide.
I think we can hear her. She better not. It's fine. It's the room.
Yeah.
So what she was saying, so actually just to catch the commissioner up on this, so as part of the discussion that occurred on this item on Monday, Councilman Harris brought up a very good point. She was relating back to when when PARA was created. It was first known as, what's it? It was PERC. And, okay, I like it. Is that right? So anyway, what ended up happening is, as it worked its way through, it ended up getting into the hands of the city council. It got some revisions to the point where it could be passed, and then it was named PARA to reflect the change. And I think what Linda is suggesting here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that she's suggesting that the city council come up with what amounts to a name for the Community Safety Act that would be reflective of all the work that's been done by everyone in regards to this matter. Is that right? Okay.
So it's been agreed that the Community Safety Act title is going to change?
I think that's what she's suggesting. It hasn't been to the point of being agreed to yet, we're talking about it.
It was requested by the FOP.
So I don't want to be redundant, because I missed the past 3 meetings I've had, but this has been an issue with, symbolically it's been an issue with what it represents. And so I know symbolically it's important to the community as it is to the police. We had the same identical issue 2.5 years ago with the racial profiling bill. And at the very end, that was changed with the community and the police as well. So I do think it's important, and I would support a name change. I'm not creative, I'm not going to suggest what that should be, but those 2 that are here and the others, that whether the council names it or this committee has a recommendation to change it, I would support, a strong support symbolically in changing the name as we've come so far, and the changes in the support for this program.
Thank you. Any other points or considerations on this item? I think that that's something with that if it's agreed upon by everyone on the working group, that the council would be able to definitely work towards making a title that I think is reflective of the work that's been put into this. Any other suggestions or points on this matter, item number 1?
So just for clarity's sake, so we're not going to discuss potential meetings, we're just going to move that up to the city council as the next step?
What does everyone think about that? Is that fine?
Okay.
What I'm going to have him do now is just, as we're going through these next items, I'm going to have him just read again what the proposed changes are. We can follow along on our one page, is that correct? And so we can open up to discussion on each matter. So, Nick, please.
Yeah, so under number 2, we're in the video and audio recording, little I-4. So right now, it currently reads, once a video audio recording of a stop has been preserved by the police department for further investigation, that would change to read, and I'll read it slowly, once a video audio recording of a stop has been preserved beyond the minimum retention period established by policy, the police department, by the police department for further investigation. So just add that bit about the minimum retention period to make it clear exactly this is what we're referring to. It doesn't change the intent, it's just about clarity.
Okay, so just so everyone can follow where we are, we're on the one page there. We're on the bottom of the page on item number, or paragraph number 4. What Nick is saying is, once it starts now, once a video audio recording of a stop has been preserved, it would add, the suggestion here is that it would add beyond the minimum retention, what is it?
Period established by policy.
Then it would continue by the police department for further investigation. So it's literally adding that section there. And if everyone would like to have Nick read it one more time to make sure we all have the wording down. Go ahead, Nick, please.
Once the video audio recording of a stop has been preserved beyond the minimum retention period established by policy by the police department for further investigation. Chief, I see that addresses the concern there.
It does, and clarification is needed in that once we go to buy one county for thousands and thousands of video audio recordings captured, that will automatically go into a cloud storage. There would be requirements for every single person video audio of that has been made. So only those who are going to keep it for investigation will notify
And that was the original.
Yeah, I think that was the intent.
Can you read the
Of course. Once a video audio recording of a stop has been preserved beyond the minimum retention period established by policy by the police department for further investigation.
Are there any other comments or points or suggestions on that proposed change?
So is there a friendly amendment to accept that change?
Motion moved by Martha, seconded by Justice and the Chief. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Okay, move on to the next section then.
So, number 3, this is something we spent a good amount of time discussing on Monday. This section here under section F, surveillance and privacy, subsection 8, this is where the CSA discusses the gang list and the criteria, what can be used for criteria, what cannot be used for criteria. The suggestion from the chief and from the FOP was to alter it to allow association to be allowed to be a criteria here, but with some caveat. And we talked last time about only if there's other corroborating evidence, only if the criteria that's been met. Since the last meeting, we played around with this a little bit more, and the language that I wanted to put forward, and see how you could take it today, would be to amend little I1, or Prevention Association, that right now, and just after where it says identified as gang members, we would add the phrase, unless that association occurred while gang members are engaged in gang or criminal activity. So the full thing would read, association with other people identified as gang members, unless that association occurred while the gang members are engaged in gang or criminal activity or any substantially equivalent factor. So the idea there was to try to bring in some of the comments we got last time about it shouldn't just be tied to seeing two people together, but rather there should be some sort of connection back to crime or investigation, something along those lines. So we want to put that language out there.
Please. Yep.
Association with other people identified as gang members, unless that association occurred while the gang members were engaged in gang or criminal activity or any substantially equivalent factor.
Well, we're going to read it again. There's a lot to this, and so I want to make sure that everyone has it down. So we're going to give a moment for everyone to just catch up with what they're writing. And then in a moment, we'll have Nick read that again, okay?
Just let me know when you're ready.
Okay, Nick, I think we're ready.
Association with other people identified as gang members, unless that association occurred while the gang members are engaged in gang or criminal activity or any substantially equivalent factor.
As we're discussing this, we'll be able to have it read again just for the edification of everyone, okay? Are there any initial thoughts or comments, suggestions based upon what Nick is proposing?
So because I brought up the clarification of the last 2 meetings, I believe, and we've had lengthy conversations surrounding this issue. That's the first I'm hearing on this recommendation. Overall, not completely 100% satisfied with the language. Nonetheless, I don't want to hold this portion of the document up. It gets complicated. I could bring up thousands of scenarios, but for the record, I'm satisfied with the amendment made and
Justice?
So I think this still doesn't quite hit what, it's still too broad. Like for example, like last meeting I brought up like if you're smoking and weed together, like that's still not, that's a criminal activity, but it's still not enough to be used as far as I'm concerned for a gang list. So I still think in the sense that this is still trying to get at an exemption that doesn't necessarily, that isn't relevant to association. Again, this goes back to the fact that it's activity, not association, that's the problem. And that's, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to make that more clear. Just that like if it's still involving this activity, then it's the activity that's the issue, not the association. The association is still separate from the activity. I still think that has to be recognized. And I think this broadens the scope in a way that's not, in a way that allows for far too many cracks.
Thank you, Justice. Any other comments or points on that? What we're going to have is you can read it again, okay?
Association with other people identified as gang members, unless that association occurred while the gang members are engaged in gang criminal activity or any substantially equivalent action.
So, just to clarify for everyone here, what's being added is, so it starts off, association with other people identified as gang members. The proposed change here is adding at this point, unless the association occurred while the gang members are engaged in gang or criminal activity, and then it goes, that's the end of the proposed change. And then it goes back into what's already been written here, or any substantially equivalent factor. Linda.
The feeling for the suggestion is adding that, but or being activity really gets to me because that could be anything from smoking weed to if that makes sense. That's what I see was the problem in this change.
Thank you. Nick?
So I think that what Justice said earlier was something sort of interesting, that it should be about the activity and not the association. Is there a way that we can rephrase this to reference reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, something like that? Does that get us closer to something? Would they going to be okay with that language? I'm just trying to come up with some creative way to get us past this roadblock.
Justice.
Well, I think activities are covered, or rather not covered, the way it is originally written, right? Like you can already use activity. That's why I don't understand why, like, association is not the issue, and activity is not blocked in this ordinance. And I know, chief clients showed me some like criteria from other places, and the thing was they do use association pretty blanketly. We're asking for that to not be the case in Providence, right? So it's not that they use association, we're trying to figure out how to use it, it's that we no longer want that to be the issue. There have a lot of other factors that we haven't blocked in this ordinance. It just, association would be one that we are blocking. So we are specifically trying to deviate from other cities, right? That is a specific thing that we're asking for, and activity isn't blocked by the ordinance as written.
And we don't know what other things can be considered. So,
Thank you.
And then, just to add another point, I know part of the association concern is, potential to either be a victim of gang violence or potential to be a gang member, but like the clarification I asked for last meeting, if you're on the gang database, you are considered a gang member, right? So it's not about potential to be a gang member, it is, once you're there, you're being considered that. And so even association, even if that's being used to, look out for folks, right, that's not enough to make someone be considered a gang member. That's not enough to put someone on a gang database. It's a different standard. And I
Because that would be the activity.
exactly. And I think we need to be very clear that you can't be put on the gang database simply because of association. Even if that is a cause for suspicion or concern, that's not the same as actually being a gang member. And I do think we need to acknowledge that.
Can we do it? The association would never put any on the database, that's never. So it's a weighted system where the very low number contributed to that weight. But again, we talked about this high and low, it gets complicated, so I'm actually fine with either ordinance for the next suggestion for the ordinance. I think it's important in public safety in the city to allow for association, but I think we can craft ways to tie it to it.
Thank you, Chief. Any other comments or suggestions or points on this matter? Hearing none. We don't need to, actually, this wouldn't even be an amendment, it's keeping what's there. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry, Sid, please. Sure, Councilman.
So I just want to be clear with the game database, how it works. In my part of the neighborhood, in Pleasant, Smith Hill, in the older area, we have some known gang members and gang activity there. I am extremely active in my community. Main Heights, we have some issues in there with some gang members and stuff. Johnson, Amherst, the Illinois area, all of that. I myself, at times, interact with these individuals in a positive way with the street workers to try to get them out of, the situation that they may be in or that's going to arise. And there are times that I take one of these young men with me and we'll go to McDonald's or Burger King or something like that there. We try to work with them. How will this affect me as a person in the community? Am I going to end up on this game database? Sergeant Hall knows when he was the district sergeant up in the area. We work with a lot of the youth, a lot of the programs that we do. I don't want to end up on this game list. So if somebody tell me how this will affect somebody in my capacity or...
Councilman, I know we're going to watch out for you, but I think I'll let Sergeant Baldwin have an answer for you.
That's my question. If the commissioner or somebody, I know that engage in gang activity, you try to diffuse and stuff. You know what I mean? I want this gang list. And I'm serious about it.
No, it's a good question, Councilman. It's a very good question. I think Sergeant you have a response to that?
Well, first off, I will try hard to tell the colonel to get you off the database. No, but that is an excellent point in being in this conversation where something like that would not put someone in a database just because you're driving the person. You're also known, as other people would be known, that are helping the children out in the streets. So that wouldn't put you on the database for that. And we understand the concerns here. It's like, hey, listen, Mayor Association, no one should be on a gang database. But I think what we're missing, and I'm not speaking for the colonel or for the commission, but I think what we're missing here is that there is that fine line where when someone crosses it, we have to have that concern for public safety. We're not trying to build a gang database. I mean, think about it, if we're the police and we're doing our job, we'd like to say there are no gangs in Providence, and we boast on that. But unfortunately, you know, at a point, someone has to be considered. But even with that point system, as the Colonel mentioned earlier, is so weighted down, the mere association would not get anybody on the gang list. We've said it last week, and we'll continue to say it now. Mere association will not get you there on that list.
Thank you, Sergeant. Go ahead, Chief.
So as I spoke and testified to last time, we never hidden from the fact that we had a gang issue in this city, as every city in America. But the way the gang database was instituted previously, you would not have been in that gang database, nor with this new language, or this new version, you certainly wouldn't be in the gang database, number one. But I think it's important going forward that, you know, we welcome all members of the community to try to diffuse and mitigate gang activity, and to try to talk in there and bring them away from, steer them away from gang activity. So I think this takes us a step further, and but it would never put you anywhere close to being in the gang database.
Nick?
Just quickly before we move on to item 4, when we had a discussion about the term written notes under 304, Sergeant Bone had to leave that meeting early. It was a family situation, and I believe that you had something you wanted to bring up about that today. I didn't want to skip past it.
Well, if I may?
Yes.
Yes.
Just to point out, everyone, so this is in that same item number 3. It's just further up in the paragraph. It's in the first sentence after the first comma where it says ignore any written notes. Is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah.
Okay. So
the question came up with the written notes, if that's the officer's field notes. And from my, what I've been told is that would include the officer's notepad that he carries in his pocket. I don't see any reason, need, or argument that an officer's notes now have to be scrutinized, and an officer now has to be told what they can and cannot put in their own notes. Now it's almost, you're coming into the office and now you're reaching right into his notepad, right into his pocket and saying, this is what you can and can't write inside your notes. And I know that that's going to be an issue. The officer's notes are their own notes, although they can be taken into court. I have yet in 30 years of the job have ever had my notes or know of anybody else's notes that were taken into court. You know, so I don't see why now we have to worry about what we write in our notes, because now today it's writing down something with the word gang next to it, which I can't see. But those notes, although they can be taken into court, they are our private notes.
Justice.
Yes, I think part of the concern is that, like with your notes, you can like share that with someone, right? So a situation I can think of is if there is a conflict and there's someone who a police officer may suspect as a gang member, they might like write that in a note, show it to the police officer, and all of a sudden the situation is escalated. And in which case, if that is the case, and it was like wrongfully done, when someone, you know, it's when that investigation is occurring, making sure that that wasn't the case, that didn't happen, that wasn't a cause for escalation, and that someone has the right to know if that did cause escalation. I don't know if that makes sense, but making sure that like officers, even with their personal notes, which could be shared with other officers, are still held to the standard of not identifying people as gang members without due process.
Sergeant.
So I understand that, but as officers can exchange notes, I'm not reading my notes and exchanging conversation with you right now. So what's going to be next? The officers are not allowed to say the word gang during the tour of duty. They're not allowed to point at people. So I'm not saying that I'm not being facetious with this. I'm trying to explain to say, okay, at what point does this stop to where my notes are my notes, and knowing, again, with police officers, we don't sit there and flip out the notepads at the end of the day and say, look what I wrote today. Any knowledge that I have, whether it's in my pad or in my head or in my thoughts, are going to come out in conversation. And that's separate from the criteria for a gang. So I can stand outside and say, Colonel, Bob Bone's in a gang. And the Colonel's going to say, well, it doesn't meet the criteria, it's not a gang, period. So the field notes for an officer, for me to go back and tell my guys and women, okay, your field notes, you can't write anything in there that's saying they're associated with a gang. You can't write the word gang, you can't write initials in the word gang, you can't write G for gang. I mean, how far does it go? How do I explain that to them if they can't write certain things in their notes? It's not going to be easy.
Mark, are you sure? Okay, Nick, please.
Well, so just for clarity's sake, the way that this is written right now, it wouldn't prevent some of the things that you just described. So an officer would be allowed to say possible gang member, gang member question mark, things like that. The idea here would be that if the person doesn't actually fit the criteria for being on the gang list, hasn't already been run the gang list, then you can't refer to them as a known gang member because we're trying to use the gang list as the way to define them. Just as we have a tax sale here today, the tax assessor isn't, or the tax collector isn't going to say that I'm delinquent on my taxes if I'm not actually meeting the criteria for being delinquent on my taxes. We're not going to refer to somebody as a gang member even who knows if they don't meet that criteria. Now, in the field notes, if you go, geez, this guy's been around the Hartford Park projects, I've seen a bunch of guys who are Hartford soldiers. Somebody writes in their notes, gang member, question mark, that's still allowed in this.
So I have to tell our guys to put question mark after the gang. We're getting down to officers, okay, this is what you have to write in your personal notepad, and it's, I pay for my notepad, I pay for the pen and paper that goes into the notepad. If the city wants to pay for it, then that would be another conversation at another time, but I can't tell our guys and our men and women what to write and what not to write in the notepads.
Just real quick, then we'll go to Mark.
I think it feels like an exaggeration to say that that's a problem. In other professions, in the medical profession, you write notes all the time, and those have to be written at a professional standard according to whatever discipline you're a part of. And I think it's okay to ask the police to know that the professional standard is you don't misidentify somebody in your notes.
Thank you.
And notes, as reports can be, as witness statements can be, they can all be wrong, and that's what the court is there for, to decipher through them. We don't have a policy on what we can and can't write in our notepads. I don't think doctors have policies on what they can and can't write. I don't know. If you know, then look it up. I know that our notepads can be taken in as exhibits in court, as evidence, but up to that point, we don't have any restrictions that I'm aware of. We can write in our notepads.
Chief.
So, Mark, to clarify, we spoke about this last time, so we can absolutely make it administratively that nowhere in the official documents and police reports, the statements or official statements of the Providence Comprehensive would identify anyone as a gang member or even as a questionable gang member unless they're in the gang database. And once again, any member of the Providence Police can insert someone into the gang database. There's only a select few people, like Sergeant Ball testified to last time in all my years in practice. I never had access to that. I couldn't put somebody on the gang list. He couldn't put somebody on the gang list. It's going to be even more streamlined going forward. So any individual notes mean nothing because they can't put somebody on the gang list. And we can subpoena them, and I think it was brought up from Attorney Crowe last time, that all the years that
You're supposed to hand them over.
you're supposed to hand them off, right, but in all your years, did they ever get the
I have
job?
fewer years, but apparently the city's been violating rules of discovery according to what Sergeant Bowman shared with us. Which
I don't know about that. But either way, it can't be in an official document of the Providence Police unless you're on the game database. So in that respect, I agree with you. You know, you can write whatever you want in your notes, but if there's needed, you should turn them over. You have personal notes.
Justice.
I guess my concern is why would an officer need to identify someone as a gang member if they're not considered a gang member in their records? Like, why are you defending that?
Well, I'm not defending so much that we're being questioned who we're identifying as gang members. What I'm cautious of is that an officer now who writes down, Oriental Rascals, and then at the bottom of the page, he writes 3 names, and then bumps into somebody else who writes another name down, that is taken, and now it's like, well, wait a minute, you just said this. Well, these are my notes, that's not what I said. My notes are just my memory, my transcriptions of what I had in my head at that point in time. So the officers, and if it's not like we have a notepad that sits there and says, this is a gang member, and then we run back to the station and say, look what I found today. I have my notepad since I got on the job, and if you looked at it and see, I probably wouldn't be able to figure out what I meant when I wrote it down at that point in time. But it was for me during that course of the week, the month, that particular area I was working at, just jotting down phone numbers. I believe that if we go to our offices and say to them, listen, we're restricting you to what you can write in your notes. It's not going to be, because again, what's going to be next with this? I can't think that they're in a gang. I can't perceive that they're in a gang. I don't know.
So it sounds like the concern is about being micromanaged and that potentially an offhand or a quickly written note in there that doesn't get corrected to add possible or something like that above it would then lead to a violation of the ordinance. And I understand that that's your concern basically. So what if we were to add language here in the first line, it says no police officer shall identify any individual as a member of a gang. What if we were to add some language of like a known member of a gang or confirmed member of a gang? Would that help alleviate some of that? Because then it's limiting it down to that specific phrase.
But are we actually identifying, if I wrote my name down, if I wrote down, just for instance, Nick, Oriental Rascals, okay? And that just tells me in my notes that I saw you hanging out over there at that point in time. I'm not identifying you as a gang member. And I think that, this is for the gang database. My notepad is not a gang database. My notepad is for me to write down notes and scribble things down.
Right, so the amendment that I was just suggesting would say that if in that scenario where you just, on your pad, you write down Oriental Rascals, and then underneath you put down a few suspect descriptions, or even a couple names or something, that would be all right, as long as you're not writing Nick Freeman, confirmed member of the Oriental Rascals. Would that, does that help you get there?
No, but yeah, that would help.
So does everyone follow what Nick was just suggesting there? Justice.
I guess I don't know if that actually changes the meaning, but if it were to change the meaning, it would also change it for the more official documents as well. So that's what I would be concerned with. Yeah.
So the suggestion by Nick was taking what currently reads as, no police officer shall identify any individual as a member of a gang any less than, then it goes on. 2, no police officer shall identify any individual as, let's just say, either unknown gang, known member of a gang or a confirmed member of a gang in any less than. Justice.
I guess, I mean, I feel like that, one, I don't, like I said, I don't know if that makes a difference, because I think it's the same thing. I think you shouldn't be identifying people's gang members generally, right? Like, it doesn't, whether they're confirmed or not. But I think the point of this one is, right, is you're not identifying individuals as members of a gang unless they're confirmed. So to say, as a known member of a gang, it's redundant. I feel like the point of this isn't to say, like, to micromanage police officers' notes. It's not to say, oh, you can't write certain things. It's that you should not misidentify people as gang members. Point blank period. And you don't have to go back and say, you can't write in your notes this. You just have to say, you cannot misidentify people as gang members. Like, I think that's the ask. And I think if we're going to hold the department to the standard, we have to hold officers to that standard, not to misidentify people as gang members. And I think, like, your written notes is part of that, right? I do think, like, you're not completely,
They're not part of the database.
but they are part of the enforcement of law. They are part of an officer interacting with people on the basis of law.
No.
Sorry, it's okay.
No, I think there's and you brought up the doctors, when they take notes, they're notes that they pass on to the next shift, the next doctor. Our notes stay with us. Our notes are basically, hey, what was that guy's phone number? Hey, what was that report number? Just something to scribble on. In fact, you know, oftentimes you scratch something down, a report number that you'll remember for later on, or a plate that you're looking for at the end of the night because they said that, you know, they're looking for a certain plate. So the officer writes it down in his pad. I mean, so it has nothing to do with the gang database. It has, that officer, and again, the way that this is written now, that officer can't even walk up and say, hey, look what I put in my notepad. I said he's a gang member. Because that criteria still wouldn't fit that person as being a gang member. It's not, the power of that pad isn't so much to say, oh, since I wrote it down in my pad, he's a gang member, everybody knows he's a gang member. I've never seen what anybody other officers have written in their pads. None of my pads have ever been subpoenaed. The problem I see with this is telling our officers, okay, we're now watching, you know, what you have in your pad. And now you're being told what you can and can't write in your pad. You know, the notes you pass, it just doesn't make sense.
So it gets complicated. Just as an example, we just finished and announced a 10-month investigation today, 36 drug dealers in southeastern New England, a criminal investigation run by the Providence Police Department. During the course of that 10 months, there was only 36 people whose names came up. Some other names came up, and officers could put their names in a notepad. And 3 months from now, they'll say, we're not saying they're drug dealers, but they were caught up in this investigation. So when I have the name in there, Bob Bone, in my notebook, and a month from now I stop and I'm like, he was part of that investigation. He's not a drug dealer as far as I know, but in my notes I have him. Why do I have him in my notes? Because he was caught up in that investigation. That's information, that's intelligence that we use going forward. Now we get a little bit more, and he never comes up again, that's it. I'm not saying he's a drug dealer, but now later on, when I get him in the middle of the situation and with drugs in the car, his name was caught in the middle of that investigation. I mean, you're not identifying someone as a gang member, you're making notes. It's good police work.
Nick,
So, you know, we talked about this in a meeting, we talked about it here. It doesn't seem like the group's able to come to a consensus on any change to this particular part. And so, trying to be respectful of everybody's time here, would it make more sense to just say in the final report that gets sent to the council here that this was a major area of discussion, there was disagreement on it, couldn't come to consensus, and just have that be a point in the report without formally recommending any change? Is that something people would be amenable to?
Justice, did you have something?
I was just gonna say that activity would not be blocked by the ordinance. Because that activity wouldn't be blocked by the ordinance because you're not identifying as gang member. So you would still be able to do that. That was any program.
So you're just looking to say that the officer can't write down, this person is a gang member, and write their name in their own personal notes?
Yes.
And Nick, you say the way it's written?
I was just going to suggest that if this isn't something that the group as a whole, I mean, we're trying to reach consensus on all these changes, if there's not consensus on a specific language change here, if it's something that can just be noted in the final report back to the council, this was a major point of discussion, these are the arguments on each side, no decision was made, no consensus could be reached.
Marcus?
I'm a little concerned at forwarding something that's not resolved.
Okay.
And that leaves it to the council to resolve it, and once you start making amendments, doesn't feel like a path I want to go down.
Sid?
The problem is, Mark, is that if it comes off as something that the council doesn't, we put in something that they only do this and don't feel like it was addressed, you know what I mean, or that there was real consensus, or they find another point, they'll vote it out. So we're really at the risk of going that far. And so I think that, because it's a yes or no, you know what I mean, because they're going to have to down the vote. So I do think that, you know, to Nick's point of doing some kind of either oral language or whatever, and then figure out, you know, what makes sense, rather than, because at the end, it still has to have a council vote.
Right, which is why it felt particularly risky not resolving it.
Justice?
And it's like, I guess like the concern I have is the same concern I brought up at the beginning, right, is how those notes are used in the field. I don't know, I'm not an officer, but I do know, like, my high school, there was an incident where the notes were used, and that escalated a situation where about 8 people got arrested, including parents, and a crowd, dozens of people got maced because someone misidentified the situation. An officer misidentified the situation. And so I don't feel that I feel like your written note should be subject to the same standard of not misidentifying individuals as gang members. And it's not to say that you can't talk about suspicion. All of the references you all brought up would be fine under this ordinance. I think this was the same issue we were having with the association, right? It's like, it's not to say you can't write people's names. It's not to say you can't suggest that people might be hanging out with certain crowds or take your notes. It's just saying you can't identify people as gang members unless they meet the criteria that you have set up for being a gang member.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but since only a select group can access or enter folks into the gang database, it's a small group of folks that really need to be trained on this.
Well, that's not the way it's written, and that's why I asked that. Are we talking about every single individual police officer that wears a uniform carrying a notepad in his pocket that we are scrutinizing? If you want to ask, if that written note meant the investigators that are sitting there doing the investigation, that are sitting there doing the intelligence gathering, or are we talking about, again, the individual police officer who has no access to the data database, who has no criteria, no authority to put anyone in the game database? Do we really have to go to the point where we have to go into each and every patrolman and patrolwoman's pocket and be worried about what they're writing inside a notepad that'll be in their pocket for about a month before they have to go out and get a brand new one because they're filling up with notes every day. And I can tell you that that notepad, unless there's something very important in it, usually goes into a shoebox in their house. Where mine was.
Chief?
So again, we spoke about this last time, I think we're kind of talking about the same thing, and that's a good point, Mark, in that anyone with access with the ability to enter someone into the game database, and that's only a select few individuals, cannot do what's written in there. I think that covers it. Because the sergeant's point is, now you're talking 400, 450 officers, any of them can't say maybe at some point in the future, but even at that, they're for the most part not calling someone a game. But you're saying we can gather intelligence, gather information, similar to this drug investigation. So I think if we qualify and say anyone with the ability to enter, I don't know if that satisfies me.
Nick, did you have?
Yeah, so I kind of like that idea for the chief. Is there, maybe I'll turn to Kate on this one. Is it, maybe we could scratch where it says written notes in there right now, and then add an extra line that says anyone authorized to enter individuals into the gang list or gang database shall not identify and
Qualify
the last name. Is that?
Okay, does that make sense? So, Nick, do you want to write something up so we can spread it around to everybody and then we can talk about that? Yeah.
So I guess the first change I would say is just scratch written notes from where it is in the second line right now. But then at the end of that sentence, we could add or make a period there. Next sentence, add a new sentence that would say any police department official who is authorized to enter individuals into the gang list or gang database shall not identify any individual as a member of a gang in their written notes unless the individual meets the criteria for inclusion on the gang list.
Does that sort of idea resonate with people? Justice?
Could we just change the authorized to enter individuals into authorized to enter information?
I guess my question would be the chief on that, because I don't know how entering into the database works.
So Justice was asking if instead of a person authorized to enter names, it would be a person authorized to enter information. Is that correct, Justice?
Yes.
I would rather get anyone officially with the gang number into the game database.
No, I mean, just that instead of it just being like those who are authorized to enter individuals, generally folks who are have authorization to access the main database.
So the talk is identifying the person within the department who would be able to enter, instead of saying enter names into the gang database, it's a matter of entering information into the gang database. So it's more of an identification of the person who's authorized to do that. Is it someone who's authorized to put in names, or is it someone who's authorized to put in information? A name is information.
So instead of because some people have systems where only one person is designated to put in specific types of information. So this would just be if you're authorized to enter information in a gang database, then you're held to the standard of not you're held to the standard versus not only if you're authorized to enter names into the database.
I think Nick is finishing up this suggestion. What I'm going to have him do is give him a minute to finish that, and then read it again for everyone to hear. That will include what Justice suggested, and then we can talk about that.
see how this works. So the line that we would be adding would read, no police department official authorized to enter information into the gang database shall identify any individual as a gang member in written notes unless that individual meets the criteria for inclusion in the gang list or gang database.
I'm going to have him read that again, and then Kate has her question. Kate, why do you?
My suggestion would be that the second half should just mirror this language exactly, so unless, like, it's minor, but.
Oh, where it's a so-called.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just going to copy and paste this phrase.
Fair enough.
So, do you want to read that? Please, that's the question.
So, no police department official authorized to enter information to the gang database shall identify any individual as a gang member in written notes unless the individual meets the criteria for inclusion on a so-called gang list or gang database.
I'm going to have Nick read it one more time, then we can. Okay, Nick, thank you.
No police department official authorized to enter information into the gang database shall identify any individual as a gang member in written notes unless the individual meets the criteria for inclusion on a so-called gang list or gang database.
Any suggestions or comments or points on that suggested edit? Thank you, Martha.
Does that mean there's a friendly amendment to accept that?
Move to accept it.
Motion made to accept that edit. Second by the sergeant. Any discussion on the edit? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you. Good job, Nick.
Okay, so
I'm on hold for the contract.
That's how you talk.
You can't do that.
Okay, so our next, moving on, our next matter, which is Councilman.
Nah, but I was going to ask you to read it one more time.
Oh, no, thanks. I think his tongue's getting tied a little bit on that, so. Okay, we can move on to the next item.
yeah, so item number 4, this is again something that we discussed at Monday night's meeting. And the discussion on Monday night was about adding in the words knowing and willful before each instance where it says violation of this ordinance is an attempt to make some sort of a good faith clause in here. Now, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the way the discussion went on Monday, it seemed as though there was a lot of resistance to this idea. A lot of the points that are being made is this isn't about punishing individual officers, but making sure that someone whose rights are violated, whether it is willing, knowing, or malicious or not, that person has the ability to then have some sort of restitution. So with that in mind, looking through this since Monday, I thought that perhaps we could leave out the knowing and willful, but I am looking at little I2 underneath that section. And that does allow for bringing a suit against any law enforcement officer that's engaged, is engaging, or continues to engage in violation of any section of this ordinance. Whereas little I1 is just about suing the city or the police department rather than an individual officer. So with that sort of logic from the last meeting in mind, it's not about punishing individual officers. If we don't add the knowing and willful into there, would people be willing to eliminate little I2? Is that something people would be willing to do?
Does everyone follow along with that? Yes, please. Justice.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, okay. I think, I mean, I would be fine with that suggestion for adding the clause specifically to law IT, but not providing them. Does that make sense?
The money all comes from the city.
We don't have much.
Well, then you should sue me.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Can you say that again?
So instead of just eliminating I2, adding the knowing and willful to little I2, but not adding it to little I1. So that way there's still accountability, but less directly impacting the officer.
So under that language, an individual would only be able to sue the officer individually if it was a known unlawful violation.
Yeah.
Any further comments, suggestions on that point? So the idea here is to consider adding knowing and willful before violations in little I2 and basically leaving little I1 alone. Is that right? Any comments or suggestions or points on that?
I don't, I think Justice worded it rather. You should work for me.
How's everyone feel about this?
Motion to accept.
Motion made to accept by the Commissioner, seconded by Linda. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. The ayes have it. What else do we have?
And then the last item in here is a discussion relative to the final report. Now, this is always a sort of awkward moment when we deal with these short-term and often very time-constrained committees and commissions, is that in all likelihood, based on the time constraints, this is our last meeting. So it's going to be very, it was literally impossible for me to have the report ready to go before tonight's meeting without knowing what the results of tonight's conversation was going to be. So what's been done in other commissions in the past is that the committee would vote to approve sort of preemptively that I would put it together with the chair and the vice chair to write the final report. And now I think that what the goal of the final report on this is not that it's going to be like a 20-page lengthy document about every discussion that was in here, but rather sort of like a cover letter to the final red line version that reflects all the changes that were discussed in here. And so it would be a recommendation to the council that they pass the ordinance with the following amendments that were agreed to in a collaborative and consensus building process.
What I like about that suggestion is that it increases the likelihood that everyone who wants to read this is going to read it. Not to say that 20-page report people wouldn't be interested in reading, but with time constraints and the like, it might be read after we are looking to take action on it. So I think what Nick is suggesting is the best way to get the points across on what occurred while we met.
Motion to accept item 5.
There's a motion on the table made by the Commissioner. Is there a second? We will have discussion. All right, second made by the Chief. Discussion, Justice.
No.
Oh, you seconded?
Yes.
Oh, seconded by Justice and the Chief. I like that. Any discussion? Madam Clerk.
Motion.
Yes.
What we're saying is we're accepting changes that we're agreeing on throughout the course of these meetings. And if we'll put those into the red line version, and that's going to be what's presented to the ordinance committee.
Basically a red line version with a cover sheet.
And everybody's accepting.
Yes. So does that make sense? That's the motion. Okay.
Second that.
Councilman.
Just, I know on your agenda, item number 1, there was some discussion on the possible name change.
It's coming back to the council.
And I personally would like to see, and again, the chair of the committee is here, rather than send it to the council, let 14 council members try to decide on name. I feel that there were 2 good names that were submitted. I would like to see possibly, if you would agree, let the committee make that decision and on a name, and vote it out of committee with a new name and whatnot, and put it on the final draft. Well, that's just my recommendation if you want.
No, it's a good recommendation, Councilman. And I think the idea that could come from the committee, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it could be handled by the council office in consultation with council members. So it's not something that I took as having to go before the body to get, the majority of votes in there. But again, open to consultation by council members and otherwise handled through the office of the council. Okay? So, any further discussion on the matter?
I think
So,
we,
please,
I
Mark.
think we have a slight preference for the second one, if that means anything to anyone.
No, it does. It needs to, yes.
Do you have a slight preference towards Providence Community Restoration Act?
Yes.
Okay, that's duly noted. Chief.
I like that one as well.
Okay?
I like Martha.
Any other discussion on the motion? With none being heard, all those in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. It's the last item, right? With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Multiple motions to adjourn. Multiple seconds. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? These ayes have it. Meeting is.